Just going back.
All right. We have another episode, clip, whatever you want to call it, from the Whatever podcast. We have She's Baffled, all caps. It's really important to this editor where he puts the caps. When he says men are more, all caps, oppressed because of the draft, all caps. I categorically disagree with that entire sentiment. Let's see. We unfortunately have Andrew Wilson. Hooray. And just a bunch of regular college looking age women. Just a bunch of regular girls. So cool. Great. We'll see how this goes, I guess. Because this is where you really want to show off your debate skills, Andrew. Regular college woman with no debate experience whatsoever. All right, here we go. Let's see what we got.
So just going back all throughout history, I would argue that the burdens placed on men, and this actually comes down to one sole male-specific grievance. I think that all feminist arguments about oppression are dead on arrival. In fact, men have been more oppressed than women, and here's precisely how. So all of women's collective grievances fall flat in the face of just one sole male grievance, and that's forced military conscription.
So you think that men are more oppressed than women because they are subject to being forced to fight in a war?
So I'm putting aside all the other male grievances that I've listed, and there's quite a few, and they're quite significant. But just
not just for fighting a war. They can be pressed into conscription for anything which is voted in by prescription of Congress to draft them for. It could be a war. It could be some other national effort. We don't know. We've never seen the full extent of it implemented in law, but it's actually quite broad.
So, I mean, yes, throughout all of human history, yes, I would argue that sole male-only grievance is bigger than all of the women's collective grievances combined. Okay, let me ask you, are you...
I'm a little bit baffled. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay. Well, I mean, what's a bigger grievance, not being allowed to vote or the death of 20 million men?
I think that you're kind of quantifying it in a weird way.
Well, I'm playing the feminist game here. Feminism is a comparison.
Not.
Feminism is a comparison game. Women have it worse than men. And here I am giving you pushback and saying, well, hold on, let's look at...
No. Your claim was oppression. The draft is not oppression at all. So your point is dead on arrival. Sorry, Brian.
This dimension that is a gendered thing, this gendered expectation that men can be forced to go die in some war, go and die in some trench.
Like I can see how as a man I would probably not be a fan of the draft because I wouldn't want to die. I think the fact that you think that men are somehow more oppressed than women. I also, you're going back to this idea that feminism is innately a comparison game.
It is. How could it not be?
In your opinion, the way that you're defining feminism, and if you'll want to try to say that I'm not a feminist and
there's way too many different types of feminism for him to make a claim like that. Yeah, there's definitely feminism that plays the oppression Olympics. I don't see how that's relevant, but
from your logic game, that's fine. In your world, you could say I'm not a feminist or whatever if that's the type of path that you're trying to lead me down. But
no,
the thing is that
you certainly are.
Well, the thing is that I was emphasizing that I think that feminism needs to evolve to continue on with the same goal that I think women had in mind, or at least the goal that I had in mind which is equity, not equality.
I'm a little confused. What's equity? What would be an example of equity?
So there's the way I learned about it is that there could be a series of boxes.
Yeah,
and
I'm familiar.
So
yeah.
so do you know what I'm talking about? Where in this sense, equity would be measures to have women have the same rights in the eyes of society and also men. So it would, the ways that women and men would be upholded would be in different ways.
This is a terrible argument. It just sucks because these are not professional debaters, whereas Andrew is definitely a professional debater. And while Brian is not a professional debater, he has a lot of experience with these exact same questions that he asks every single week. So he's got a lot of practice with this specific topic matter. He's got his list of points that he can go through to kind of dodge all of the usual points that they're going to make. And it's just, of course, she's not going to be ready for that. I mean, she's just not going to be ready for that.
Saying that this view
The equity, equality is such a, it's a pointless argument. It's a low tier argument. It's like the TikTok Temu version of an argument.
feminism, that women need to somehow now have it better off than men, or that some women would say that women continue to have it worse than men, would be in this guise that it's a comparative structure. What I'm saying is that the whole idea of comparison is pitting the sides against each other. It's not about that. It's about seeing each other for what we really need.
Can I just interject and just ask one quick clarifying question? Assume for a second the draft tomorrow was expanded to women and you were drafted. Would you go?
I don't want to fight in a war, and I'm not saying that men want to fight in a war either. I know that there was a whole lot.
Yeah, I know, but would you go?
Would I go fight in a war?
Yeah.
No, I don't think I would be very good in combat. I also don't want to die, selfishly.
Did you have a follow-up, Andrew, or I have some?
No,
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to get that clarified real quick.
Okay. Well, I mean, when it comes to this whole military conscription thing, what would be the feminist equity perspective on the current state of things when it comes to equity and the fact that men are only subject to military conscription?
My perspective would be boo-hoo. We do it because we're the ones that can. It's not oppression. We're the ones that can do that.
I'm not going to say that I have an answer, but I would say that if women are against fighting in a war and being subject to the draft, and you're using a feminist agenda to try to uphold that, it would be a kind of a weak argument. It would have holes in it, because you would say, well, if you think that women and men are equal, then get on the battlefield with them. But I think that men also love to uphold the idea that part of the gender expectations that are held upon them is that they are the protectors and they are physically stronger. And so if you're physically stronger and you want to protect me, then go do it.
Well, what if a man doesn't want to be drafted? That doesn't really change the fact that in the event of a draft, he would be drafted.
Can I ask something?
What's up?
I don't know the historics of it. Like, how did that come to be?
What do you mean?
Like, drafting people and it, like,
okay, I mean, I think I could take a crack at this, but I mean, throughout all human history, different tribes warred with each other, and if you were a man and you were able-bodied, they would put a spear in your hand and say, you're going to defend the tribe, otherwise they're going to take our land, they're going to take our women, they're going to commit atrocities against our civilian population. So I would imagine it just goes way back into human history of there's warring tribes, there's different.
Well, I would actually even go a step further and just grant, I think, what you're angling at, which is, I think the patriarchy brought us the draft.
Yeah, exactly.
That it was a system of patriarchy which brought us the draft here in the United States. Do you guys disagree with that, or was?
Oh, slam dunk, Andrew. Not really.
Is that kind of where you were going?
I mean, yeah, probably, but who cares
With that?
No, that's so valid.
It's not a dunk. It's valid, but it's not a dunk.
Yeah, totally, right? So I got to ask you a question. how in the world could we ever repeal any of these things which the patriarchy have imposed upon us without appealing again to another patriarchy to do so?
Oh God, the stupid forced doctrine. Who cares? Crap.
You can't.
You can't.
Another patriarchy.
Which means that grid one is correct and patriarchy is inevitable.
What's your other version of
It's true. Patriarchy is inevitable. That doesn't mean women can't have rights and all that other stuff, all that other good stuff. Patriarchy is inevitable, so why fuss about it?
a different patriarchy, like a matriarchy?
What could you appeal to which was not a patriarchy and would not become a patriarchy by necessity in order to overthrow a patriarchy?
I've never been here to necessarily overthrow the patriarchy. I think that's kind of a combative way of looking at the whole situation, and I've seen models of a matriarchy.
Well,
that
I don't
people try
think
to
so.
present.
So, for instance, let's say you passed laws. You would say that you would pass laws in order to get rid of this nefarious patriarchy, right?
I didn't say that.
Okay, but I don't understand then. How would you replace a patriarchy?
She never said she
You
wanted
keep
to,
saying
Andrew.
I want to replace the patriarchy. I never said that I
She
wanted to replace
literally
the patriarchy.
never said that.
Okay, so then can you answer my question of how you would be able to replace a patriarchy even if you don't want to, absent appealing to
Why
a
would she
patriarchy?
have to come up with plans to do
I
things
don't
she
think that I
doesn't want to
necessarily
do?
have the answer to that question.
Yeah, because nobody has an answer to that question, because you necessarily will always create a new patriarchy no matter what. You have to appeal to the thing which you're trying to dismantle in order to dismantle the thing. That's why it's cyclical. It can't ever really work.
So you're saying that men are systematically superior to women?
In the domain of force application, yes.
And
They are
yeah,
100% superior to women in every single way almost.
So what? So what? Oh my God. What is going on?
When it comes to force application.
for you like strength.
Well,
Wait.
not just strength, but any force application, be it machinery, guns, any of these things are going to be inherently superior because they are stronger and have larger skeletons.
Wait, I did want to
So
go. Oh, go ahead, Andrew.
So essentially, I'm just saying that the reason that this, to me, has always been circular logic is because I cannot ever seem to get an answer of how you would dismantle a patriarchy without appealing to a patriarchy, thus creating a new patriarchy in order to dismantle the old one.
What are your thoughts on a matriarchy?
First of all, I don't know why she said that. Well, I do know why she said that. It's because she's not a professional debater and she is not prepared for what's about to happen. But I don't think any of them said they want to dismantle the patriarchy. He's literally shadowboxing with ghosts right now.
I'm just curious.
They're non-existent. They can't actually exist because of this force application.
No, a theoretical matriarchy.
They can't even theoretically exist, I don't think, because of the force applicator. So as long as there's men in the society, they're always going to have the monopoly on force application. Because that's true, I don't think a matriarchy is actually logically possible unless you were in some like really lopsided situation, like I don't know, you had 10,000 women and like 100 men. I think that might be possible, but even then, I'm not sure. You know, I'm not even sure then. So, but I don't think it's logically possible inside of general societies to have matriarchal systems.
Do you think that
So
I
what?
lost my train of thought, but you think that a matriarchy
So
in theory
what?
just wouldn't work because women, like in order for a society to operate on a functional basis, you would need strong force operation to be
Yeah, you have to have
there?
force applicators in order to enforce the law of the land. So in other words, if there's a criminal and you want him punished, there has to be big, burly, strong guys who take his ass to court and throw him in prison and guard him at night. And there has to be big, strong men around to guard you at night with guns from other men who might hurt you. So yeah, absent the force applicator, I don't see how it could ever work.
I can see what you're saying.
Here, I
Joe.
got one question. I didn't really get like a straight answer on this. So what would be the equitable thing when it comes to the current state of the military, the draft?
I don't have a strong answer. I would say that in the guise of the patriarchy, men, if they are in fact the superior force and they are viewed in their gender
But
roles
from the feminist worldview.
from the feminist
'Cause you said it was
worldview.
about equities.
If I were to propose something to unoppress the men.
No, let's assume that a draft is required. Like, you can't get rid of a draft.
There is a draft, yeah. Like the United States has a draft.
Right. So, I mean, I don't know if I'm oversimplifying this, but I mean, the immediate answer that comes to my mind is you would simply equalize the draft. Women and men are subject to military conscription.
Right, that would be the automatic answer, would be that both men and women would be subject to being in the army.
But under your whole thing with feminism being for equity, would that be equitable for both men and women to be subject to military conscription?
I would say not necessarily. Also, you're taking the way that I defined feminism and you're creating this whole idea that I'm defending feminism to the ends of the earth under the guise of its definition as it exists now. And that's not what I said. I said that I was actually criticizing.
Yeah, they're literally arguing with nothing right now because I don't think any of them said they want to remove the patriarchy. I don't think any of them said any of that.
Some of the elements of feminism. I said I don't think it should be a comparative structure.
But I'm just a little bit confused. So, like, do you think that women should be allowed to vote?
Do I think that the sky is
Oh my God, this insane argument.
blue? Of course I do.
Right, I'm in favor of women voting, but it's interesting to me that you immediately say, yes, women should be allowed to vote, but you can't really give me a straight answer on if it's equitable for women to be subject to military conscription the same way that men are.
Well, I did tell you. I said that if men want to say that in a society they are the ones that are the protectors, they're the providers, they're physically stronger.
Under feminism, we don't really say that, do we?
I wouldn't say that we do, because I think in feminism people don't like to necessarily buy into evolutionary roles, because I would say that it's limiting. I don't think that evolutionary roles are necessarily the way that we must live in society. I think that's a little bit archaic. But like in some ways, I think that it is useful to look at it through that lens when we look at the innate strengths of men and women. But the thing is that at this point in society, I wasn't put on this earth to make babies and cook at home or whatever, or be a gatherer per se, and that men are going to be hunters. That's not the way that I was raised, at least.
Were you put here to cure cancer?
No, I don't think I was
she
born
has a
with.
point that then once we get to this point where women have our rights, we're educated, we're, we've
Well,
gained this
hold on.
equal.
So if women weren't put here to be what? Just say what you said again.
To be baby makers and gatherers.
Right, and men weren't put here to be disposable parts of the military-industrial complex and just be put
define
through,
it in the same way,
hold
please.
on.
Don't
to be,
say that
No,
like
I'm to be just put through the meat grinder of war.
Well, if you were to parallel the logic you're saying, and you're saying women are baby makers and gatherers, men would be providers and hunters.
And protectors.
And
And
They
part
are.
of that
But I
entailment.
mean, hang on. But how can you say that they're not? Men provide the food. Overwhelmingly, they provide basically all of it, in fact. Women provide almost none of it. Men provide all the infrastructure. How are they not providing and gathering? Seems like that's exactly what they're doing.
What do you
I
mean,
don't know if
money-wise?
that's in every household. I don't know if that's true. Now that feminism has, like,
Well, you can buy the food, but
Well,
it's made by men.
Like
sure.
they're in the farms and they're in
No,
the
they're
slaughterhouses?
hunting.
Yeah,
Well,
who do you
yes.
think is making all the food? Do you think
Yeah,
it's a bunch of
most-
women out there with hoes and they're going, ooh, and they're hiking up the cabbage? Like, what do you think's going on out there? on
Well,
those
not
farms?
only is it majority men in
I mean, I feel
agriculture,
like at this point
how
it's
do
a
you
lot of
get the
machinery, but
food
whatever.
From point A to point B,
Mm-hmm.
men are overwhelmingly, for example, truck drivers.
I don't think that anyone was.
But let me double down a bit on this. And then how do trucks run? Well, they run on oil. Men are overwhelmingly the ones who are, for example, in the oil industry.
Who takes care of your children?
I don't see how that's really
Well,
relevant.
generally
but-
not their mother, unfortunately,
you're
because
looking- you're
feminism
looking at the
demands that
things-
mothers. I'm going to answer your question. Generally, the mother is not taking care of the children at home, which is the most optimal system, because feminism has demanded that women go into the workplace in order to have these crazy social safety nets. So we actually outsource the raising of our children to strangers. That seems less than optimal to me.
But who are those caregivers typically? Are they men or are they women?
Generally speaking, women are doing the same jobs that they've always done, yes. So they're in teaching roles in service industry. That's basically what they mostly do. And I don't even see why.
I can't even put my full 2 cents in on this one because they've already let him get so far off track that it's like a moot. It's like moot at this point.
Why there's necessarily a problem with that. It's fine for your child, I guess, to go to school in kindergarten, have a kindergarten teacher, but I think that outsourcing your child care for the purpose of you going to work is a less than optimal system. That seems to be something which is far more oppressive to women than any of these systems that you've cited.
Well, this was a system designed by men, so maybe you should talk to the men about why women have to go and work.
It has not been. Women, since they've had egalitarianism, have been able to vote on these systems and have definitely had their input and have reformed how these systems operate absent patriarchy. That's not true that women have no say now and that this is a patriarchal system. Women, by and large, they vote almost as much as men do.
I wasn't talking about political power necessarily.
Well, I mean, even institutional
Even though,
power.
I mean, look at the ratio in Congress. I mean, like, it's pretty obvious who's in power.
How is that obvious?
Just look at the numbers. You love to look at numbers.
Yeah, but the systems themselves are not just designed by Congress, but by lobbyists, by women inside of educational systems. There's all sorts of pull and thrust because now women are political pawns because they can vote, right?
Sure, I guess you could say that. I wouldn't reduce women down to political pawns, but
Well, I mean, but your overlords in Congress wouldn't they?
they would, wouldn't they?
Yeah, they would. They would.
Yeah.
So that's how they are viewed, men and women, as just being a demographic of voting pawns.
Are men political
And-
pawns in the same way, yet they have to go into the draft?
Yeah, men have also been political pawns. That's correct. But when it comes to the draft, there's no real way around it because you cannot have a fighting force which is equipped by mostly not men and have it be effective. There's no good way around that.
Well, then how is it oppression, to your point?
What do you mean?
Well, it would be oppression because there's no additional privilege that comes with the expectation, whereas in the reverse, that would never
That is not how we define oppression. That has never been how anyone defines oppression. That is nonsense.
be the case. What sort of privilege do you think that women would have absent an
Absurd.
expectation? I'd love to know what it is.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah, like men have to go and get drafted and go fight in wars. Women do not. What is the privilege that men get for having that responsibility?
What's the privilege that women get for bearing the children, getting to stay at home?
The
Yeah,
government
that's a
doesn't
huge
force
privilege.
you to get pregnant.
First of all, hang on, I'll just answer directly. Yeah, that seems like a huge privilege.
Okay, well, I'll take my privilege and you can go out on the battlefield as a man.
Okay, so what? I guess all that equity was just bullshit.
I didn't say that.
Well, then I thought that's what we wanted was equity. Does it sound like we have that tall box so that we have that equity that you're talking about so we can both see over the same fence?
Look, I'm not saying that the draft would be probably one of the more contentious points that you could bring up when you talk about gender roles. I don't want to bring up reproductive rights because I know that you all would love to destroy me on
It's
that
like
one.
the only one.
But women die in childbirth, and also child rearing
Yeah, but
is
it's rare. It's
Well,
rare that
it's-
women die.
They
in
die
childbirth.
after abortions too.
Okay, respectfully, I'm not going to get into that whole thing. My point is that child rearing is not, I would say that the roles that women take in society are not necessarily as valued as the roles that men take.
Why should they be?
What do you mean?
I just asked you a direct question. You said that women's value in society is not as valuable as men. Why should it be the case that it is?
In under the eyes of equity, it should be.
Yeah, but you just got done saying you don't care about equity because
I never said that I didn't care.
Well, then I don't understand. If it's a privilege for you to stay at home, but not a privilege for me to fight a war, how's that equity?
I don't think that it's an innate privilege for me to get to stay at home. In that context, I could have the privilege of my safety, and you don't.
It's not.
But you have the privilege of walking home at night and not being afraid that you're going to get attacked.
Hang on. How is it not a privilege to have somebody else providing for you while you stay at home?
Because I'm raising kids, and so
what
they're
if you're not
providing?
Raising kids?
Well, if I'm not, then sure, then I should go be a productive member of society.
Okay,
But
so
if you're going to sit here and try to...
Because if you're staying at home and your hubby's taking care of you, and he can be drafted, and you cannot be drafted,
boring argument.
How's that equity?
Because there's other responsibilities that I would have as a woman.
What?
Well, under this societal structure, if you're saying that that's the expectation, I'm not saying that women should have to go and be child bearers if they don't want to, but if you're going to look at the patriarchy and you're going to analyze gender roles to try to justify the draft or whatever it is, then...
Yeah, but how is it not a privilege, again, back to the question, how is it not a privilege for you to be able to stay at home and raise no children at all, and he is still subject to the draft and you are not? How are you not privileged, and how's that not how is that equitable in any way?
Well, women can still go to war, they're just not obligated to. And
yeah, so that wouldn't be equity, would it?
Well, let me finish. You're right. Under this argument, that would be the case. But
this is such a boring argument because the odds of us having a draft again are like 0%. We fight more with technology than we do with manpower now. Anyway, it's just a boring argument. Even if it was oppression, who cares?
I don't know. You're right. I have a hard time with this one because you are subjecting men and not women. But the thing is that
I kind of I don't totally agree with it, but I'm kind of starting to agree with Erudite's position that men like this that are like, men are the enforcement arm, so men should be able to vote. You're not the enforcement arm, Andrew, and neither is Brian, and neither of you ever will be. So it is kind of like stolen valor. Like, this one group of men goes and fights wars, and so you should get to vote? So you're oppressed by a draft that will likely never happen? Like, very likely never happen. It's so sad. It's such a sad, tired, old argument.
The draft, I'm pretty sure that it was men. Like, why were they not subjecting women to the draft earlier? But why were they not subjecting women to the draft earlier then?
Because women took over in the workforce.
Because women are ineffective soldiers.
Okay, well then go be an effective soldier.
Let me add another argument to that. So on a macro level, for example, if a society were to send large swaths of young, fit women, able-bodied women to war, let's say it's
that would obviously be terrible, and we should never do that. That's who cares?
Civilization, women. You need women to be able to perpetuate the population. So a man can impregnate 1,000 women, but a woman can only be pregnant with one child at any given time. So on the macro level, it does make sense from that component. Like if the society is like, okay, we're going to send 20 to 30, 40, 50% of our able-bodied citizenry, and that same cohort of people, if it was women, would be the most fertile too, at least from a historical perspective. From that sense, it would make more sense to send men, because you'd be better able to replenish the population of a society.
And so with that logic, then is it innately just a privilege for women to not be subject to that, given your logic that men would be more effective?
Not anymore.
Right. Well
yes.
Then, yeah.
Yeah. How would it not be? How would it not be that you're privileged just because you cannot form a task as effective as somebody else? Therefore, you get some bonus that they don't get. That's the opposite of equity.
Who cares? Life's not fair. We're not equal.
I see what you're saying. I still don't agree that it's innately a privilege, because you're kind of going with this logic
It's the
that
opposite of equity. How could it be anything other than the opposite of equity to say, because you cannot perform the task as well, that therefore these people do, but it's equitable because of that? That makes no sense.
because in your view, society would be upheld in that sense because you're not
Yeah,
sending.
but I'm a patriarchist. You're the feminist. In my
you're,
view,
you're pitting
yes.
us against each other in a way that's really just not productive. Like, I'm trying to understand what you're saying, and you're just trying
Well,
to make it
I'm going
wrong.
to explain it to you so that you understand. So it's fine for you to do an internal critique. I'm fine with that. But I'm doing one as well. My worldview is that I believe in patriarchy. I'm a patriarchist. So I believe that men deserve to have additional privileges that women do not deserve to have because of the force applicator society relies on that men bring to the table. You as the
Yeah, but not you, though. Not you, Andrew. Just remember that. Not you.
feminists believe instead that there should be equity between both sexes. That's fine. You can say that you believe that there should be equity, but when I show you a significant problem where equity really can't exist, you just kind of shrug it off, and I don't really understand that.
Well, so you think that, and I really hate the idea that we're going to pigeonhole women to just being child bearers. I think they contribute a lot more to society
Well, who else
than
can
just
do
that.
it?
You're right.
What else? Wait. They can't produce anything more valuable than
Well,
children.
yeah, so if you want to talk about the things that are really special to women, really special to men, then you could boil it down to that if you want to simplify it. But I think that this idea that women get the privilege of safety, the women get the privilege of safety, but also there's a variety of tasks that would be required of them if they were to be raising children.
Yeah,
And
but
so
the
that's-
government does not compel any given woman to have children. You
Have
could
children.
you could go through your entire life and just choose
Just like they haven't compelled anyone to military service since Vietnam.
to never have children.
That's actually not true. Depending on the state you live in, if you're what states force
Okay.
you? There's a lot of states that
You're
have
talking about
anti-abortion
abortion.
You're
laws.
talking-
Okay,
yeah, she's
but-
saying
That's a total non sequitur. Abortion has nothing to do with this conversation.
that there are states that won't allow you to
If
abort.
she got
yeah,
that
that's
saved,
true,
okay.
but no, the states did not force you to open your legs.
I just
right?
think that it's
not
funny
at
that the
all.
way
A man
you're
can.
looking at brute force or what is it called, force application, and men
force
sacrificing their
applications.
lives and their safety to go to war, but you're not viewing women's role in the same way. You're not looking at it that men get the
Because it's not
privilege
the
to
same.
not be responsible for children and the upkeep of the
How do
nuclear
they get
family.
the privilege of not being responsible? If you have a child tomorrow with a man,
'Cause
he's
you would
going to
be
be
at
responsible.
war. Because you
hang
would be
on. If
providing.
you have, hang on, I'm going to explain so that you understand, because I'll look at it through your worldview. Tomorrow, if you got pregnant in a state where abortion was legal, does a man have any say at all on whether or not you abort?
In California, no.
No, he does not. So if you have a child, that is 100% your choice, absent him, but he is still responsible based on your choice for rearing the child or not rearing the child. So even if you choose to have the kid, he still has to pay child support. Nobody's letting him off the hook. That does sound like it's equity because it's based on your choice. In this case, this is compelled. This is not based on choice. So if that is true and you do not have that, I do not understand how that could be equitable.
Well, I don't think that, first of all, I would say that California would be more progressive in that sense, in terms of the feminist agenda, per se, if that's how you want to put it. In other states, that's not necessarily the case. Women are not allowed to have an abortion freely in the same way that,
Oh, it's not relevant. But this is what happens when you put college students up against world-class professional debaters. This is what happens.
They could
People in-
travel to another state.
well, wouldn't you say
But
that
even-
that's
but
not
wait,
really,
Even then, okay, hang on. Even then, though, right, in all of the states where abortion is legal, does a man have a say in whether or not a woman can have one or not?
They're the ones that are making the laws typically, and they are restricting women's access to abortion.
No, they're not. Women
Yes,
also
they are.
make laws and vote on laws.
Yeah, and
I don't know where
I'm
you get
not
the
for
idea
those
that it's
women.
all men who are voting on these laws. They most certainly are not.
It's women in the context of the patriarchy, though. Might as well be a man at that point.
Okay, so even if it's the patriarchy who is giving you abortion rights, we'll just grant it for the sake of argument. Is there a single state which you can be in where a man can that has abortion which is legalized, where a man
She doesn't know that she can just bite this, because now they're on the hyper defensive because they know they're out of their depth, and so now they're going to dodge answering every question they possibly can, because that's what people who are out of their depth do. And we're already so far past the point of no return with this line of argumentation. I mean, I would have quashed this immediately long ago.
can tell you, no,
28 minutes
you can't
ago.
go abort that child.
A male citizen could not directly prevent me
Yeah,
from
they
getting an
can't do it.
abortion under the guise
So
of the
then
law.
it's going to be your choice. And if it's going to be your choice, and the man is still held responsible for child support, this type of thing, that at least sounds like it has, even from your worldview, equity. But how in the world can you say that there's equity in a draft? How could that be equitable?
I'm not going to repeat myself because clearly my argument to you is not compelling.
I can move things on a little
Yeah.
bit here. It's just interesting to me. It would be so easy to just say, yeah, equality would be both men and women being subject to military conscription, but it seems like you aren't really prepared to propose that.
That's why I used the word equity instead.
I don't really-
And you don't have to be for that, and I'm not. And the whole point of equity is that you're not equal in every context. That's the whole point. And so in the context of force application, men and women are not equal. You said it yourself.
Yeah, so to each according to their own, and from each according to what they can give.
That's not what you said.
Is that what you mean by equity?
Oh boy.
In terms of gender roles, or like on
Yeah.
the basis of individual difference.
Yeah, and the logical conclusion of the argument she's accidentally about to make is that women are forced to give birth to children.
Gender roles.
Yes, I guess.
Do you want to repeat it, Andrew, one more time?
So communism?
Okay, now he's jumping all over the place.
I don't put words in my mouth. That's not what I said.
Andrew-
No, that's literally what that is. To each according to what they can give, and from each according to what they can give. That's communism. Literally.
I think you're oversimplifying my
Marxist
argument.
doctrine. I just read. I mean, it's not verbatim. I'm paraphrasing it, but that's Marxist doctrine.
Any tankies at the table?
I would love to hear from the women that seem that
any
they're.
communists? at the
I do
table?
feel like it's really hard to know, like, we can only be one gender, so it's very hard
Hang on,
to know.
I just want to
what
read
it's-
this verbatim. From each according to his ability.
Yeah, there you
to
go,
each
Andrew.
according to his needs.
Totally scuffed
That
it the
sounds like
first time.
exactly what you're saying. So, from each according to his ability. In this case, men have the ability to be the applicators of force.
All right, this
and
one's
so
almost
you think it's
over.
equitable
Thank
that they
God.
fight your wars. To each according
What
to
do
their
we have
needs. In this
next?
case, you need to be protected, and so men need to protect.
Oh
you,
boy,
right?
yeah, we got a
I didn't say any of that.
Let me ask
probably
you
a
question.
funny
Would
one
you,
coming up.
would you
I think you did, but
Would you prefer?
Okay.
Would
For
you,
your
and
agenda,
I think
did.
Andrew won't be in it, which
Would
will
you
be
prefer-
well, I
a
mean,
nice
you agreed.
change
You
of pace.
literally said yes. I asked you the question. I mean, I paraphrased it. That's
Andrew,
true.
I
but it was
didn't say that
basically
I
the
was
same
a
thing.
communist. I never said that. You're trying to prove I was a communist to what? Be an antagonizer? Like, I'm not
Okay,
a
hold on,
communist.
No, I'm just okay. Well, let me just ask you. From each according to his ability. In this case, you say under gender that men have the ability to do this, and so they should, right?
I don't agree with the idea that you should take all men in America and schlep them off to whatever country.
all men in the U.S. are subject to the selective
To
service.
the draft.
Well, isn't that a big fat bummer?
Exactly. Finally, that is the point. Yeah, bummer. Get over it.